Have you ever used the internet to search for something simple? Maybe a question, an idea, or even your future, without realizing that behind that simple search exists one of the greatest success stories in human history. A story that began not in a palace, not in a billionaire's office, but in a small student room filled with uncertainty, curiosity, and belief. Before we begin, if you are someone who wants to unlock powerful ideas, understand how great empires are built, and transform the way you see success, make sure you subscribe to the channel, because today you are not just listening to a story. You're discovering the mindset that can turn nothing into everything. This story is revealed in the book The Google Guys. It takes us back to a time when the internet was still young, a time when information existed, but it was disorganized, chaotic, difficult to navigate. People knew the internet had power, but nobody had fully unlocked its potential. At Stanford University, two young students were walking paths that would soon change the world forever. Larry Page was not like most students. He wasn't interested in simply graduating and finding a stable job. He was obsessed with understanding systems. He wanted to understand how things worked at their deepest level. He asked questions others were too distracted to ask. At the same time, Sergey Brin had his own unique mind. He was curious, energetic, and fearless in challenging ideas. Where Larry was quiet and analytical, Sergey was bold and expressive. When they met, they did not immediately become friends. In fact, they argued. They disagreed. They challenged each other constantly. But what seemed like conflict was actually the beginning of something powerful, because great ideas are rarely born from agreement. They are born from friction, from questioning, from refusing to accept the limits of what already exists. Larry began exploring a question that nobody had solved properly. The internet contained billions of pages, but how could you find the most important ones? Existing search engines looked at keywords, but keywords alone were not enough. They did not measure importance. They did not measure trust. Larry imagined something different. He imagined a system where links between websites acted like votes. If many websites linked to a page, it meant that page was important, valuable, trusted. This idea transformed search from a simple keyword match into a system of intelligence. This was not just an improvement, it was a revolution. Together, Larry and Sergey began building their system. They worked long hours, nights turned into mornings. Their computers were not powerful. Their resources were limited. They had no guarantee that their work would matter, but they continued because belief is often the only resource available at the beginning. Their early system was rough, imperfect, fragile, but it worked. And when people used it, they noticed something different. The results were better, cleaner, more accurate. People found what they needed faster. Without realizing it, Larry and Sergey had solved one of the internet's greatest problems. But solving the problem was only the beginning, because now they faced a new challenge: survival. Their system required computing power, storage, infrastructure, things they could barely afford. Their servers crashed frequently. They ran out of space. They pushed their machines beyond their limits. Most people at this stage would have stopped. Most people would have accepted reality. Most people would have told themselves it was impossible. But Larry and Sergey refused to accept limitations as permanent. They adapted, they improvised, they built storage systems using cheap components. They created solutions where none existed. They turned scarcity into creativity. Eventually, they realized their project had grown beyond a university experiment. It needed to become something more, something real, something independent. They gave it a name: Google. The name came from the word Google, representing a number so large it symbolized infinity. It was not just a name, it was a declaration of ambition. Their mission was clear: organize the world's information and make it accessible to everyone. But ambition alone does not create success. They needed support. They needed investors. They needed belief from others. And belief is often the hardest thing to obtain. Many investors did not understand their vision. Some saw potential, but also risk. Others believed the market was already dominated. They questioned whether two students could truly compete with established companies. Rejection became part of their journey. But rejection did not stop them, because rejection does not define failure. It defines the path to resilience. Eventually, they found people who believed in them, people who saw not just what Google was, but what it could become. As Google began to grow, Larry and Sergey made decisions that separated them from everyone else. They refused to sacrifice user experience for short-term profit. They kept their homepage simple, fast, clean, focused. This simplicity became their identity. While competitors chased revenue aggressively, Google chased excellence, and excellence attracted users. Users returned. Users trusted. Users depended on Google. Slowly, steadily, Google grew stronger. But perhaps their greatest strength was their culture. They built an environment where thinking differently was encouraged, where questioning was allowed, where innovation was expected. They understood a powerful truth. The future belongs to creators, not followers. They hired people who were intelligent, curious, and driven. They created teams capable of solving problems others thought impossible, and over Chimi, their influence expanded. What began as a student project became a global force. What began as curiosity became transformation. What began as uncertainty became dominance. But their story teaches something deeper than business success. It teaches that success begins with mindset. It begins with curiosity. It begins with courage. It begins with the willingness to continue when success is invisible. Larry and Sergey did not succeed because they had advantages. They've succeeded because they refused to accept limitations. They refused to think small. They refused to stop. Their journey reminds us that the world is shaped not by those who follow existing paths, but by those who create new ones. Right now, somewhere in the world, someone has an idea that seems small, an idea that seems impossible, an idea that others may ignore, but every great transformation begins exactly that way. As an idea, as belief, as courage, and maybe the next great success story is not in Silicon Valley. Maybe it is in your mind. If you want to continue discovering the ideas, stories, and mindsets that have the power to transform your thinking and your future, make sure you subscribe to the channel, because this is more than knowledge. This is the beginning of your transformation.